Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was a student in the Justice League Academy? Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was screaming, not with voices, but with physics. The very air in Muzidifa had become a shrieking, kaleidoscopic thing, twisting around the villain who called himself Manifold. His quirk wasn't just spatial. It was a ride of possibilities, a drunken stagger through dimensions. The street buckled, asphalt flowing like water one moment and shattering into crystalline fractals the next. Stop signs melted into Dali-esque ribbons, and the sound of panicked screams echoed backward, arriving before they were uttered. Izuku Deku Midoriya, clad in the tattered remains of his gamma costume, skidded to a halt, the soles of his iron soles grinding against a patch of pavement that had momentarily decided to obey the laws of nature. Green lightning, the vibrant signature of One for All, full cowling, crackled around him, a small island of order in a sea of chaos. Ida, left flank. He's warping the path. Watch your footing. Deku yelled, his voice strained. Understood, Midoriya. Tenya Ida's armored form was a blue and white blur, his engines roaring as he navigated the treacherous, shifting ground to evacuate the last of the civilians. Deku, above you. Achiko Uraraka's voice was a welcome anchor. She floated nearby, tapping debris with her fingertips and sending chunks of broken concrete drifting harmlessly into the sky, clearing paths and creating barriers. Manifold cackled, his body flickering like a bad holographic projection. Heroes. You think you can contain infinity? I am everywhere. I am every when. He thrust his hands forward, and reality folded in on itself. A row of buildings across the street squeezed together as if in a vice, their windows shattering in a silent, discordant crunch. Deku grits his teeth, pushing his power output to 15%. The familiar, comforting burn raced through his muscles. This was his element. The chaos, the danger, the desperate need to save someone. It was the crucible in which he had been forged. He saw his opening. Manifold's power was immense but uncontrolled, creating momentary pockets of stability in his wake. Deku bounced off a warped lamppost, using Black Whip to snag a fire hydrant, and slingshot himself forward. Air Force, Manchester Smash, I need to get in close, disable him without getting caught in the distortion. His internal analysis was cut short by a new sound, a high-pitched whine that vibrated in his bones. Manifold was glowing, his form coalescing into a single point of blinding, swirling light. He's losing control. Uraraka shouted, her voice tight with fear. The villain screamed, a sound that wasn't just sound, but a texture, a color, a feeling of pure agony. If I can't have this world, I'll unmake it. A vortex erupted from his chest, not black like a hole, but a churning maelstrom of fractured colors and impossible geometry. It wasn't pulling things in with gravity. It was erasing them, unwriting them from existence. It devoured a car, which simply ceased to be. It touched the edge of a building, and a perfectly clean, scooped-out void appeared. Deku's eyes widened in horror. This wasn't a quirk anymore. It was a cataclysm. In the path of the expanding vortex, frozen in terror, was a young girl who had been separated from her parents, clutching a small All Might keychain. There was no time for a plan. No time for analysis. There was only the instinct, the core programming of his very soul. Save her. Ida! Get Uraraka out of here! Now! Deku roared, not waiting for a reply. He pushed One for All to its screaming limit, 45%, feeling the familiar, agonizing toll on his body. The world became a green-tinged blur. He was a thunderbolt, a cannonball of pure heroic will. He scooped the little girl into his arms in a single fluid motion, the force of his stop tearing up the pavement beneath his feet. He didn't slow down, using the momentum to pivot and hurl her with every ounce of his strength towards Ida's approaching form. Got her! Ida yelled, catching her securely. Relief washed over Deku, a single, pure, beautiful wave. And then he felt the pull. It wasn't a force. It was an unbeing. A cold, absolute nothingness that latched onto his back. The crackle of One for All sputtered and died. The green lightning was swallowed by the vortex's prismatic chaos. He felt his body stretching, not physically, but existentially, his very atoms being pulled apart and resequenced. He turned his head, a final, desperate act. His last sight was the faces of his friends, Ida's helmeted face a mask of shock, and Uraraka's, pale with terror, her hand outstretched, her mouth forming his name. Deku! Then the world, and everything in it, was gone. Pain was the first sensation. A dull, throbbing ache in the back of his head. Then came the smell, damp concrete, stale garbage, and the unfamiliar scent of roasting nuts. And the sounds. A low, guttural language he didn't recognize, the distant wail of a siren with a completely different cadence than the ones in Japan, the rumble of what sounded like a train overhead. Izuku Midoriya's eyes fluttered open. Gray. A gray brick wall, slick with grime, was inches from his face. A gray, cracked pavement was beneath him. A gray, overcast sky was visible between two towering, unfamiliar buildings. He pushed himself up, his body feeling sluggish and heavy. His costume was a wreck, torn and scorched, the green fabric dark with dirt. His mask was gone. He stumbled out of the alleyway, his mind a fog of disorientation. Where was he? Musudafu General? Had he been knocked out? The street hit him like a physical blow. The buildings were monstrous, grand structures of steel and glass that scraped the sky with an architectural style he'd never seen, a sort of retrofuturistic Art Deco. The cars were different, bigger and bulkier. And the people, they were a sea of every ethnicity imaginable, all moving with a purpose and speaking that same harsh, guttural language, English, his mind supplied, dredged up from years of present mixed less than engaging lessons. His heart began to hammer against his ribs. This wasn't Japan. He staggered to a newsstand, his eyes scanning the papers. The text was all in English. He saw the masthead, bold and iconic, the Daily Planet. Below it, a headline, Superman prevents downtown dam collapse. Superman? Daily Planet? It sounded like something out of a pre-Quark-era comic book. It made no sense. He felt a frantic, clawing panic begin to rise in his throat. He needed to calm down. Analyze. Observe. What would Aizawa-sensei do? He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, reaching inward for the familiar, comforting inferno of One for All. He sought the crackling core of power, the sunlit ocean of energy that resided within him, the legacy of 8 heroes living inside his soul. He found nothing. A void. An absolute, terrifying emptiness where a universe of power had once been. The panic wasn't clawing anymore. It was a tidal wave. He reached again, desperately, like a man searching for a lost limb. Nothing. The quiet hum of energy that was a constant companion, the feeling of limitless potential thrumming just beneath his skin, it was gone. He felt normal, just a boy in a ruined costume, standing on a foreign street. A quirkless boy. The word, a ghost from his childhood, sent a shard of ice through his heart. He stumbled back, his legs weak, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The weight of his own body felt alien. For years, One for All had made him lighter, stronger, faster. Now, gravity itself felt like a crushing burden. He was just Izuku Midoriya. Quirkless. Powerless. Alone. The thought was so devastating it nearly brought him to his knees. He was nothing. A fraud. All Might's legacy, the power he had bled and broken his bones for, had vanished as if it had never been. It was in that moment of despair, when the world was closing in, that he heard a scream. It was a woman's voice, sharp with terror. It came from the alley he had just exited. The sound cut through his personal hell like a thunderclap. Every hero has a trigger, a stimulus that bypasses thought and ignites instinct. For Deku, it had always been the sound of someone in need. He didn't think. He didn't consider his lack of power. He didn't hesitate. He spun on his heel and ran back into the alley. 2 men had a woman cornered, her purse already in one of their hands. One was large and brutish, the other wiry, holding a glinting pocket knife. They were laughing, enjoying her fear. "Give us the wallet, lady, and we won't have to get messy," the wiry one sneered. Deku's mind, the one weapon he had left, kicked into overdrive. 2 opponents. One armed with a blade. Confined space limits maneuverability. The larger one is overconfident, flat-footed. The knife wielder is the real threat. No visible meta abilities. Objective: protect the victim, neutralize the threat. Without his quirk, a direct assault was suicide. He needed a distraction. His eyes darted around, landing on a metal trash can lid leaning against the wall. He scooped it up. It felt heavier than he expected. With a grunt of effort, he flung it like a discus. It sailed through the air, wobbling slightly, and clanged loudly off the brick wall just behind the larger thug's head. Both men spun around, startled. What the hell? They saw him then, a kid in a bizarre, tattered green outfit, his face grim with determination, his fists raised in a practiced fighting stance. The big man laughed. Look what we got here. A little hero wannabe. You lost, kid? Deku didn't answer. He charged. He wasn't a bolt of lightning anymore. He was just a running teenager, his footsteps loud on the pavement. He went for the bigger man first, just as Aizawa had taught them. Neutralize the largest physical threat before they can bring their power to bear. The man threw a clumsy, telegraphed punch. Deku, used to dodging attacks moving at superhuman speeds, ducked under it with ease. He drove his shoulder into the man's gut, not with the force to shatter ribs, but with enough focused momentum to knock the wind out of him. As the man doubled over with a wheezing gasp, Deku grabbed his extended arm, twisted, and used the man's own weight to throw him over his hip. The thug landed with a heavy, satisfying thud, his head cracking against the pavement hard enough to daze him. One down. The wiry one was more cautious. He brandished the knife, his eyes narrowed. You're gonna regret that, you little freak. He lunged, jabbing with the knife. Deku's body moved on instinct, a phantom limb of one for all screaming for him to activate, to dodge with impossible speed. But there was nothing there. The knife tip sliced across his arm, and a hot, searing pain erupted. It was a shocking sensation. He hadn't felt pain from such a mundane attack in years. It was real. He was vulnerable. The shock cleared his head. He couldn't rely on speed or power. He had to rely on skill. He fell back into the katas Aizawa had drilled into them for months. He parried the next thrust with his forearm, the edge of the blade scoring a line in his gauntlet, and used his other hand to lock the man's wrist. He twisted, applying pressure to the joint. The man grunted in pain, his grip on the knife loosening. Deku slammed his palm upward into the man's chin, a sharp, disorienting blow. The man staggered back, but he was wiry and fast. He recovered, kicking out at Deku's knee. Deku sidestepped, but he was a fraction too slow, his normal human reflexes feeling like wading through molasses. The kick connected with his thigh, sending a jolt of pain up his leg and making him stumble. The man saw his opening and charged again, the knife aimed for Deku's chest. Deku knew he couldn't dodge it in time. He braced himself for the impact, a desperate, defiant glare in his eyes. He wasn't going to die here. He couldn't. A sudden whoosh of air, gentle as a sigh, filled the alley. A shadow fell over them, impossibly large. The wiry thug froze mid-lunge, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated terror. He looked up, and a choked gasp escaped his lips. Oh crap! It's him. Deku followed his gaze. Floating silently, a foot off the ground, was a man. He was tall and broad-shouldered, radiating an aura of calm, unshakable power that made the air itself feel still. He wore a costume of brilliant blue, accented with red and yellow. A long red cape billowed softly behind him, defying the lack of wind in the alley. On his chest was a symbol, a stylized S in red and yellow, nestled in a shield. It was a symbol Deku had never seen before, yet it felt important. It felt like hope. This was the man from the newspaper. Superman. I believe that's enough, Superman said. His voice was deep and resonant, not booming, but filled with an authority that was absolute. The wiry mugger dropped his knife with a clatter. Both he and his dazed companion put their hands up so fast it was almost comical. Superman's eyes, a kind and piercing blue, flickered to Deku. He took in the torn costume, the shallow cut on his arm, and the determined, exhausted look on the boy's face. A flicker of intrigue, of curiosity, crossed his features. Who was this child, dressed for a battle, who had thrown himself against armed men with nothing but his fists and a suicidal amount of courage? The adrenaline that had sustained Deku through the fight vanished, replaced by a wave of crushing fatigue and overwhelming shock. His legs gave out. He sat down hard on the grimy pavement, his mind reeling. He had just been saved by a hero. A real hero. A man who flew, who commanded respect with his mere presence. He was like All Might. The thought was a gut punch. All Might. His mentor. His friends. His mother. Were they okay? Were they looking for him? Were they even in the same world anymore? The implications of his situation, the sheer, terrifying scale of his displacement, crashed down on him all at once. Superman landed softly, the ground not even vibrating with his touch. He dealt with the criminals efficiently, wrapping a bent piece of rebar from the alley wall around them as easily as if it were a twist tie. The police sirens were growing closer. He then turned to Deku, his expression softening. He knelt down, bringing himself to the boy's level. "Are you all right, son? That was a brave thing you did." Deku stared at him, his mouth agape. His analytical mind, though overwhelmed, was still working, cataloging details. Flight. Super strength, evidenced by bending the rebar. Invulnerability, likely given his calm demeanor. Possible multiple quirks? Or a single, incredibly versatile one? The symbol, it's a symbol of hope. Like All Might's smile. He tried to speak, to ask the thousand questions screaming in his head. Who, what, where am I? The words came out as a broken whisper, a mixture of Japanese and halting English. Muzutafu, the villain. Manifold. He looked down at his own hands, then back at the floating man who was the epitome of everything he had ever wanted to be. He had lost the power to be a hero, only to be saved by the greatest hero he had ever seen. The emotional whiplash was too much. The exhaustion, the pain, the fear, the despair, and the sudden, blinding awe, it all coalesced into a single point of pressure behind his eyes. His vision swam. The world tilted on its axis. The last thing he saw was Superman's concerned face leaning closer. Then, for the second time that day, his world went black. He awoke to a soft, steady hum. Not the intrusive beeping of a hospital, but a deeper, more powerful thrum, like the sound of a living star. He was lying on a bed, or something like it, a surface that was both soft and firm, conforming perfectly to his body. The room was vast, sterile, and white, the ceiling so high it was lost in shadow. The light came from the walls themselves, a gentle, ambient glow. He sat up. His tattered costume was gone, replaced by a simple gray tunic and pants. The cut on his arm had been treated and covered with a strange, translucent bandage that seemed to be actively healing the skin beneath it. "He's awake." The voice was female, warm and melodic, but with an undercurrent of regal authority. Deku turned. Standing a short distance away were three figures that seemed to have been pulled from a child's wildest dream of heroism. One was Superman, his arms crossed over his iconic shield, his presence as comforting and immense as it had been in the alley. Beside him stood a woman of breathtaking beauty and power. She was tall and statuesque, with flowing black hair and piercing, intelligent eyes. She wore armor of red, blue, and gold, and carried herself with the grace of a warrior queen. This was Wonder Woman, though Deku did not yet know her name. He only knew that she radiated a palpable aura of truth and compassion. The third figure was her complete opposite. He stood slightly apart, shrouded in the shadows at the edge of the light. He was a creature of darkness and sharp angles, his entire form encased in a dark gray and black suit, a long, scalloped cape draping behind him like a predator's wings. A cowl with pointed ears covered the top half of his face, and from it, two intense, white lenses stared out, missing nothing. He was a void, a pillar of pure, unadulterated intimidation. "Batman, where am I?" Deku asked, his voice hoarse. "You are safe," Superman said, stepping forward. "You're in the Hall of Justice." The name meant nothing to Deku, but the tone conveyed its importance. This was their headquarters. Their base. "We brought you here after you collapsed," Wonder Woman explained, her voice as gentle as he'd imagined. "You were suffering from extreme physical and emotional exhaustion. Can you tell us your name?" "Izuku Midoriya," he said automatically. He looked between the three of them, his analyst's brain trying desperately to make sense of the impossible. They were a trinity of power, light, truth, and darkness. The perfect heroic team. You mentioned a name before you passed out, the dark figure in the shadows said. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble, devoid of any warmth. It was the voice of a man who had seen the worst of the world and had become something worse to fight it. Manifold. You mentioned a place. Musudafu. Deku flinched. The voice was accusatory, analytical. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact, a demand for explanation. We have searched every known database, Batman continued, his white lenses fixed on Deku. There is no city on Earth named Musudafu. And no known metahuman or criminal operating under the name Manifold. Your costume's material composition is also unusual. It incorporates fibers we have never encountered. The truth of his situation settled upon him with the weight of a collapsing mountain. He wasn't just in another country. He was in another world. The spatial quirk hadn't just teleported him. It had thrown him across dimensions. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and sudden. He thought of his mother, of All Might, of Uraraka and Ida. He was truly, irrevocably alone. He choked back a sob, scrubbing at his eyes with the back of his hand. He wouldn't cry. Not in front of them. He had to be strong. Tell us what happened, Wonder Woman prompted, her tone softening at his distress. And so he did. He told them everything, his voice starting as a stutter and growing steadier as he lost himself in the telling. He explained quirks, the foundation of his society, where over 80% of the population had superhuman abilities. He explained the hero school's UA high, and his dream to become the greatest hero, just like his mentor. He described All Might, the symbol of peace, and the incredible power he had passed down to him, a power called One for All. And he explained how, somewhere between his world and this one, that power had been stripped from him. Superman and Wonder Woman listened with expressions of growing amazement and sympathy. Batman remained impassive, a stone gargoyle observing a strange new specimen. When Deku finished, a heavy silence filled the room. A world of heroes, Wonder Woman murmured, her voice filled with wonder. A society built around the concept, and a power that can be passed from one person to another, Superman added, looking at Deku with a new understanding. He understood the burden of being a symbol, the weight of a legacy. It was Batman who broke the spell. He stepped out of the shadows, his presence seeming to suck the very light and air out of the room. He stopped before Deku's bed, looking down at him. The white lenses were like twin searchlights, probing not just his face, but his very soul. So you come from another world, Batman stated, his voice flat and hard, cutting through any pretense of sympathy. You claim to have wielded a great power, a power that is now gone. You have no identification. No resources? No way home. He leaned in closer, and Deku felt a primal urge to shrink away. That leaves me with one, final, critical question, Izuku Midoriya. Batman paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of his scrutiny bear down on the boy. Who are you now? What can you do? The question was a blade, aimed directly at the heart of Deku's deepest insecurity. For 10 years of his life, the answer to that question had been nothing. For a precious, glorious year, the answer had been everything. And now, Deku looked up, meeting the unblinking white lenses of the terrifying dark night. He thought of the mugging, of the instinct that had driven him to act even when he was powerless and terrified. He thought of All Might's first words to him on that rooftop so long ago. You too can become a hero. The power had been the tool, not the source. The source was his spirit. He swallowed the lump in his throat, and when he spoke, his voice was clear, trembling only slightly with the force of his conviction. All the shame, all the pain of his loss was there, but beneath it was an unbreakable core of defiance. My name is Izuku Midoriya, he said, his green eyes locking with the darkness of the cowl. I want to be a hero. He took a ragged breath, delivering the final, devastating truth. But I have no powers. The silence that followed Izuku Midoriya's declaration was a living thing. It was heavier than the imposing shadows Batman cast, deeper than the compassionate sorrow in Wonder Woman's eyes, and more absolute than the stunned quiet on Superman's face. In that single, sterile room at the heart of the Hall of Justice, A universe of difference separated the boy on the bed from the gods standing before him. He had laid his soul bare. The story of quirks, of a world so fundamentally different from their own, had been a fantastic tale. But his final admission, that he was now powerless, was the stark, brutal, and verifiable truth. The humming energy he'd sensed in them was a roaring fire compared to the cold, empty hearth within himself. Wonder Woman was the first to break the silence. She took a step forward, her armor making a sound like shifting tectonics, though she moved with the grace of a dancer. "To carry such a legacy is a committeria," she said, her voice resonating with an empathy that felt ancient and profound. "And to lose it, the fates can be cruel. Your courage in the face of such a loss is a testament to your spirit." Deku looked down at his hands, a blush creeping up his neck. Praise from someone so regal felt alien, undeserved. Superman's expression was one of deep contemplation. He looked at Deku not as a problem or a curiosity, but as a person. "All Might, this symbol of peace you describe," he said, his voice thoughtful. "He chose you. He saw something in you before you ever had this power. He must have had a reason." It was a simple statement, but it struck Deku with the force of a revelation. He had been so consumed by the loss of One for All that he had forgotten the beginning. He had forgotten the sludge villain, the desperate, useless charge, the moment All Might had seen not a quirkless child, but a hero. The power hadn't made him a hero, it had been the reward for already being one. But Batman was not concerned with spirit or potential. He was concerned with facts. A compelling narrative. Batman's gravelly voice cut in, pulling the atmosphere back to a cold, hard reality. "But it is, as of now, entirely unverifiable. We have an unknown entity, a juvenile, from a reality we cannot access, with a self-professed history of wielding immense power. He is a security risk of the highest order." Every word was a hammer blow to Deku's fragile hope. Of course, he'd see it that way. Logical. Tactical. It's what Aizawa-sensei would have thought. "He is a child, Bruce," Wonder Woman countered, her voice firm but not angry. "Alone and afraid. He risked his life in that alley for a stranger. That is a fact we can verify. His heart is true. Hearts can be deceived. Actions can be manipulated," Batman retorted without missing a beat. "What we know is this. He is a variable we cannot account for." He turned his chilling, white-lensed gaze back to Deku. "You analyzed us when you woke up. I saw it in your eyes. Tell me what you saw." Deku's blood ran cold. He'd been caught. He thought he'd been subtle, his mind working on autopilot. He stammered, I was just... I didn't mean, tell me," Batman repeated. It was not a request. Deku took a shaky breath. "Oh, okay." He looked at Superman. Your power feels limitless. Like the sun. It's warm, reassuring. It makes people feel safe just by being there. A pillar of hope. Your primary weakness would be psychological, exploiting your desire to protect everyone at once, forcing an impossible choice. He turned to Wonder Woman. You carry yourself like a warrior who is also royalty. Your strength is not just physical, it's a conviction. You fight for an ideal. Your movements are trained ancient. I'd guess you're not from around here either. A weakness? Perhaps an overestimation of an opponent's honor. A reluctance to accept that some foes are irredeemable. Finally, his eyes fell on Batman. He had to force himself to speak. You have no powers. None that I can sense, anyway. You're human. But you're the most dangerous one in this room. Every part of you is a weapon. Your stance, your armor, the shadows you use, they're all tools for intimidation and control. You create fear as a tactic. Your greatest strength is your mind, your preparation, so your weakness has to be the unexpected. A true unknown. Something you could never have a contingency plan for, he finished, his heart pounding, expecting to be thrown in a cell. The silence returned, now charged with a different energy. Superman and Wonder Woman exchanged a subtle, impressed glance. Batman remained perfectly still for a long moment. Then, he gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. His observation skills are adequate. Coming from him, it felt like the highest praise imaginable. He can't stay here in the hall, Batman stated, turning to the others. It's too central, too much high-level traffic. And we can't turn him out on the streets. What do we do then? Superman asked, the question hanging in the air. This was the crux of it. Deku's fate. Deku held his breath. There is one option, Superman said slowly, a thoughtful light in his eyes. A new initiative. A place where he can be monitored, cared for, and perhaps, where his unique skills can be understood, even nurtured. Wonder Woman's eyes lit up with understanding. The Academy, Batman's head tilted. You want to place an unknown interdimensional variable among the most powerful young metahumans on the planet? It's the perfect place for him, Superman argued, his voice gaining conviction. It's secure, located on a watchtower annex. John and Red Tornado are the primary overseers. He'd be safe. We could observe him, and he'd be among his peers. He has no powers. They are not his peers, Batman countered flatly. But he has the mind of a hero, Superman insisted. You saw it yourself. He analyzes tactics, abilities, weaknesses. That's a skill set most young heroes ignore until it's too late. Maybe he could learn from them, and they could learn from him. Batman was silent for a long time. Deku felt as if his entire future was being weighed on a cosmic scale. The Dark Knight paced the room once, a predator in his cage, his cape sweeping silently behind him. He stopped and looked directly at Deku. I agree, he said, and the shock in the room was palpable. Even Superman looked surprised. On one condition. I personally oversee his tactical and analytical training. His mind is his only potential asset. I want to see if it's as sharp as he, and you, seem to think it is. Power is not the only weapon in a hero's arsenal. Let's see if he can forge his own. The decision was made. Relief, so potent it made him dizzy, washed over Deku. It was a chance. A real chance. He wasn't going to be locked away or abandoned. He was being given a place. Superman knelt before him, a warm, reassuring smile on his face. Izuku Midoriya, he said, his voice gentle. We can't send you home. We don't know how. But we can offer you a new one, a place to learn, to train, and to figure out who you are in this new world. Welcome to the Justice League Academy. The mode of transport was called a Zeta Tube. For Deku, whose world considered high-speed bullet trains the pinnacle of travel, it was pure science fiction. One moment he was standing on a platform in the Hall of Justice, a tall, green-skinned man with piercing red eyes named John Johns, the Martian Manhunter, at his side. The next, a computerized voice announced his destination. A torrent of light enveloped him, and he was experiencing a sensation of being disassembled and reassembled atom by atom. He stumbled out onto another platform, his legs like jelly, his stomach somewhere near his throat. John emerged a moment later with a serene calm that Deku found both unnerving and fascinating. The sensation can be disorienting for first-time users. John's voice was a calm, telepathic whisper that brushed against the edges of Deku's mind. It wasn't invasive, but rather like hearing a voice on the wind. When Deku's vision cleared, his jaw dropped. He was in a vast, circular room. The far wall was a single, panoramic window that stretched from floor to ceiling, and through that window, hanging like a breathtaking blue and white marble in a sea of impossible black, was the earth. It turned slowly, majestically, continents of green and brown swirling under a delicate veil of clouds. He was in space. This is the Watchtower Annex, John explained, his gaze following Deku's. The primary Justice League satellite, the Watchtower, is in a higher geosynchronous orbit. This station serves as the campus for the Academy. The campus was a marvel of futuristic design. Sleek, white corridors branched off from the central hub. Holographic displays flickered with training schedules and astronomical data. The air hummed with the same quiet, powerful energy he'd felt in the Hall of Justice. John led him through a corridor into a spacious common area. Several teenagers were scattered around the room, lounging on sleek, modern furniture. A large holoscreen played a news report about a recent flash sighting in Central City. Students, John's mental voice projected calmly into the room. We have a new enrollee. This is Izuku Midoriya. Please make him feel welcome. All eyes turned to Deku. Dressed in a standard-issue gray Academy sweatsuit that felt far too big on him, he suddenly felt small and intensely scrutinized. A girl with bright blonde hair tied in a high ponytail bounced off a couch and bounded over to him, her smile radiant. She wore a black t-shirt with a golden, W emblem. A new student? Awesome! I'm Cassie. Cassie Sandsmark. She stuck out her hand, her handshake firm and enthusiastic. You came with Martian Manhunter? That's so cool. Did you meet my mentor, Wonder Woman? What are your powers? Super speed? Energy blasts? Oh, can you teleport? That would be so useful for getting snacks. Her energy was infectious and overwhelming. Deku, flustered, just stammered, hi. And Midoriya. It's nice to meet you. Before he could answer her barrage of questions, a quieter voice spoke up from a nearby workbench littered with alien-looking tech. Whoa, take it easy, Cass. Give the guy some air. The speaker was a lanky boy with dark hair, his hands covered in grease. A strange, blue, beetle-like device was attached to his back, its mandibles occasionally clicking and whirring. Jamie Reyes, he said with a friendly nod. Don't mind her. She gets excited. The blue beetle on his back emitted a series of low clicks. Jamie's eyes widened slightly. Huh. That's weird, he muttered, looking at Deku with a new curiosity. The scarab says you're baseline, no detectable metagene, no exotic energies, nothing. Deku's heart sank. He was being scanned, analyzed, and found wanting in his first 5 minutes. The word baseline had an immediate effect on the room's third occupant. Lounging on another couch as if he owned it, a boy with short black hair and a perpetually bored expression pushed himself up. He wore a black t-shirt with a stark red-ash shield on it, and radiated an aura of raw, barely contained power that reminded Deku uncomfortably of a young Katsuki Bakugo. Baseline? The boy scoffed, the word dripping with disdain. He sauntered over, looking Deku up and down with a critical, unimpressed gaze. Are you serious, John? What is this, a charity case? This is the Justice League Academy, not the Metropolis public school system. Deku flinched as if struck. The condescending tone, the immediate dismissal, it was a painful echo of his childhood. Cassie frowned, stepping slightly in front of Deku. Khan, be nice. He just got here. I'm just asking a valid question, Wonder Girl. The boy Khan shot back. We're here to train, to learn how to use our powers to save the world. What's he going to do? Take notes? The jab hit its mark perfectly, a poisoned dart straight to Deku's deepest insecurity. He opened his mouth to defend himself, to say something about his analysis, about his spirit, but the words wouldn't come. What could he say? The powerhouse in the S-shirt was right. What was he doing here? John Johns placed a calming hand on Deku's shoulder. Everyone has a role to play, Connell, his telepathic voice stated, carrying a quiet authority that cut through the tension. Izuku's placement here was approved by the entire League Council, including Superman. The mention of Superman made Khan pause. He shot Deku one last glare, a mixture of suspicion and annoyance, before turning away with a grunt. Whatever. Just keep him out of my way during combat sims. He stalked off towards a hallway, presumably leading to a training area. Jamie offered Deku an apologetic look. Don't mind Khan. His bark is way worse than his bite. Usually. He's just got a lot of issues with living up to the big guy's reputation. It's okay. Deku mumbled, though it wasn't. The encounter had left him feeling raw and exposed. Cassie gave him a reassuring smile. Don't listen to him. I think it's cool you're here. It's going to be great. John guided Deku away from the common area and down a quiet, residential corridor. Your classmates are unique individuals, the Martian said, his tone neutral. Kal-El, or Superba, is a clone of Superman. He struggles with his identity and heritage. Cassie Sandsmark is Wonder Girl, a demigod gifted with strength by Zeus. And Jamie Reyes is the host for the Blue Beetle Scarab, a piece of alien technology he is still learning to control. You will find that power does not alleviate hardship. They stopped in front of a door that slid open with a soft hiss. The room inside was small and Spartan, containing little more than a bed, a desk, and a closet. But one entire wall was a reinforced window, offering the same stunning, silent view of the Earth that had greeted him upon his arrival. "This will be your room," John said. "Your uniform and class schedule are in the closet. Rest. Your first classes begin tomorrow. Batman has already added a personalized session to your schedule." Deku's stomach did a nervous flip. "He did, indeed," John replied. "He has titled it the Batman Doctrine. It begins at 0500 hours. With that ominous warning, the Martian Manhunter turned and glided silently down the hall, leaving Deku alone in his new room. He stood there for a long time, the silence broken only by the quiet hum of the station's life support. He walked to the window and pressed his hand against the cool, transparent material. Below him, the planet drifted, a beautiful, alien world. Somewhere on that spinning globe was Metropolis. Somewhere else, far beyond the reach of any Zeta tube, was Muzudafu. He thought of his mother, picturing her worried face. He thought of his friends of all might. A wave of profound, soul-crushing loneliness washed over him, and for the first time since his arrival, he let a few tears fall. He was a ship lost at sea, his anchor ripped away, his sails torn to shreds. He was powerless, friendless, and billion miles from everything he had ever known and loved. The taunt from Khan echoed in his ears. What's he going to do? Take notes? He wiped his eyes, his jaw tightening. The despair was a suffocating blanket, but beneath it, a tiny, defiant ember began to glow. All Might hadn't chosen him for his power. Batman hadn't accepted him for his strength. They had seen something else. His mind. His spirit. He walked over to the small bag of personal effects they had given him, the few items salvaged from his ruined costume. Inside were his battered, scorched hero license and a small, plain notebook and pen they had provided after his debriefing. The notebook was empty, its pages crisp and white. A blank slate. He sat at the desk, the Earth's gentle blue light illuminating the page. He clicked the pen, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent room. With a steady hand, he wrote on the cover, Hero Analysis for a New World, Volume 1. He opened it to the first page. For a moment, he stared at the empty lines, his mind a whirl of uncertainty. Then, he began to write. Entry 1, Superman, alias, Clark Kent, unconfirmed, but overheard Diana use the name. Affiliation, Justice League, Founder/Leader. Abilities observed, flight, effortless, silent. Appears to have no need for propulsion. Top speed unknown. Super strength, casually bent solid steel rebar. Upper limits are likely astronomical. Invulnerability, stood in the path of a potential knife attack without flinching. Assumed to be near total. Heat vision, rumored, from Daily Planet article. Need to observe. Superspeed, rumored, flash report suggests he is not the fastest. Psychological profile, embodies the concept of a symbol of hope. Calm, reassuring, and compassionate demeanor. His core drive is the protection of life. Possesses immense power but exercises immense restraint. He is the ultimate shield. Potential weaknesses. As noted, his greatest strength is also a vulnerability. His unwillingness to sacrifice anyone could be exploited. Is there a physical weakness? Some equivalent to a quirk disadvantage? Unknown. The energy he radiates feels solar-based, but this is pure speculation. He kept writing, filling the page with his neat, compact script. He wrote about Wonder Woman's warrior grace, Batman's terrifying efficiency, Martian Manhunter's calm power. He wrote about Cassie's divine heritage, Jamie's symbiotic tech, and Connell's raw, Kryptonian might. The act of analysis was a comfort, a return to the one thing that had always been his. It was the familiar ritual of a quirkless boy dreaming of being a hero. The world outside his window was alien, the challenges ahead were terrifying, and the power he once commanded was gone. But as he filled the pages of his notebook, Izuku Midoriya was not just taking notes. He was forging his own weapon. He was preparing for class, and for the first time since he'd arrived in this strange new world, he felt a flicker of something he thought he had lost forever. He felt like a hero again. The chronometer on Izuku Midoriya's wall glowed with the merciless digits. 4:55. The academy was a tomb, its corridors steeped in the artificial pre-dawn silence of a space station. Not a single sound reached his room, save for the whisper-quiet hum of the environmental controls. Deku was already dressed, standing in the center of his room, the standard black and gray academy training uniform feeling foreign and loose on his frame. He hadn't slept. Every time he'd closed his eyes, he'd seen the swirling, prismatic chaos of Manifold's vortex or the cold, white lenses of Batman's cowl. At precisely 5 o'clock, the door to his room hissed open. There was no chime, no announcement. Just the silent invitation into the dark hallway. Deku's heart hammered against his ribs. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and stepped out. The door slid shut behind him, plunging him into a corridor illuminated only by thin strips of emergency lighting along the floor. At the far end, a single silhouette stood waiting. A figure of pure, predatory darkness. "Batman, you're on time," the voice rumbled, seemingly absorbing the light and sound around it. "The first test. Punctuality. You passed." Deku swallowed hard, jogging to catch up as the dark night turned and began to walk without a backward glance. His cape didn't flow, it seemed to cut through the air, a solid piece of the night sky moving with him. They walked in utter silence, their footsteps the only sound in the sleeping station. Deku's sneakers squeaked slightly on the polished floor, a nervous, intrusive sound compared to Batman's utterly silent tread. They arrived at a set of heavy, reinforced doors that slid open to reveal a room that made Deku's breath catch in his throat. It was the danger room from the X-Men comics, the combat simulation room from UA, and a CIA black site all rolled into one. It was a vast, cavernous space, its walls and floor a grid of shifting black panels. In the center, a raised observation deck with a bank of monitors was bathed in a low, blue light. "This is Training Arena Gamma," Batman stated, his voice echoing slightly in the immense space. "It can replicate any environment, any opponent, any scenario. The only limit is the imagination of the programmer. Today, it will be your classroom." He gestured towards the center of the arena floor. "Your first class of the day is scheduled for 0700. Metahuman combat simulation, taught by Black Canary and Wonder Woman. You, however, will receive a primer." Deku walked out onto the floor, the panels cool and solid beneath his feet. He felt exposed, a tiny, insignificant figure in a vast, empty expanse. "Scenario, standard street-level threat," Batman's voice announced from the observation deck. "Opponent, one armed assailant. Objective, neutralize." The floor panels around Deku lit up, and a hard-light hologram flickered into existence. It was a man, burly and mean-looking, holding a holographic crowbar. The simulation was so real Deku could see the rust on the metal and the snarling contempt on the man's face. "Begin," Batman commanded. The hologram charged. Deku fell into his familiar fighting stance, his mind screaming for the crackle of one for all. He dodged the first clumsy swing of the crowbar, the movement feeling sluggish, his body a leaden weight. He wasn't fast enough. He had the muscle memory of a superhuman, but the physical limitations of a teenager. He ducked under a second swing and tried to land a counterpunch to the hologram's midsection. His fist connected, but without the force of one for all behind it, the blow was pitiful. The hologram barely flinched. The crowbar came down again, this time catching him across the shoulder. The simulation's safety protocols registered the hit, sending a painful, electric jolt through his body that made his muscles seize. He gasped and fell to one knee. "You are telegraphing your movements." Batman's voice cut through the air, devoid of emotion. "Your footwork is sloppy. You are relying on a power you no longer possess. You are fighting the memory of a battle, not the opponent in front of you. Get up." Deku scrambled to his feet, shame burning in his cheeks. He knew all of this. He was a terrible fighter without his quirk. He was just a clumsy, analytical boy who had been gifted a god's strength. He tried again, this time focusing on Aizawa's binding cloth techniques, trying to use leverage and momentum. He managed to disarm the hologram, but in doing so, left himself open. A holographic fist slammed into his jaw, sending another jolt of simulated pain through him. The world flickered. Failure. The hologram dissolved. "Again," Batman's voice commanded. This time, there were 2 opponents. They overwhelmed him in seconds. Again, 3 opponents, one with a knife. He lasted 30 seconds. The simulated pain was accumulating, making his limbs feel heavy and his head fuzzy. Again, a single opponent, but this one was fast, a trained martial artist. Deku couldn't even land a hit. He was a puppet, and the hologram was the master. Each failure was punctuated by Batman's cold, cutting analysis. You drop your left shoulder when you pivot. Your situational awareness is non-existent. You focus on one threat and ignore the others. You are predictable. You have patterns. Patterns get you killed. By the time the main lights in the arena came on at 6:45, Deku was on the floor, bruised, exhausted, and utterly demoralized. He had failed over a dozen simulations. He hadn't won a single one. He was gasping for air, the phantom pain of the jolts making his muscles twitch. The doors to the arena slid open, and the other students walked in, looking well-rested and ready for the day. Cassie, Jamie, and Connell. They were followed by two women. One was Wonder Woman, dressed in a sleek, modern version of her Amazonian training armor. The other was a blonde woman in a black leather jacket and fishnet stockings, her posture radiating a tough, no-nonsense confidence. Black Canary. Cassie saw Deku on the floor and her face fell with concern. Deku! Are you okay? What happened? Connell scoffed, a smirk playing on his lips. Looks like Bats gave the charity case a welcome present. Couldn't even handle the warm-up, Midoriya? Deku didn't have the energy to respond. He just pushed himself into a sitting position, his body aching. Wonder Woman gave Batman a disapproving look from the observation deck. Was this necessary, Bruce? It was, Batman replied, his voice flat. He needed a baseline. Now he has one. He turned his attention to the students on the floor. The lesson has already begun. Observe. Black Canary stepped forward, addressing the class. All right, rookies. Welcome to Combat Sim. The goal here isn't just about learning how to hit harder. It's about learning how to think in a fight. Today's scenario is simple. One-on-one sparring matches. Superboy, you're up first. Your opponent. She pointed at Deku. Is him. A stunned silence fell over the group. What? Connell said, laughing. You can't be serious. That's not a fight, that's a bug splat. He's got no powers. Your opponent is your opponent, Black Canary said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The objective is not to win. It is to demonstrate control and tactical awareness. Incapacitate, do not injure. Step into the circle. Deku's heart plummeted into his stomach. This was a nightmare. A public execution. He slowly, painfully, got to his feet. Every muscle protested. He looked at Connell, who was cracking his knuckles with a predatory grin. The clone of Superman versus the quirkless boy. It was a joke. Don't worry, Midoriya. Khan sneered as they faced each other. I'll try to make this quick. Wouldn't want you to break a nail. Begin! Canary shouted. Khan moved, and the world dissolved into a blur. He wasn't as fast as Superman, not even close, but compared to a normal human, he was a lightning bolt. Deku didn't even have time to register the movement before a fist, pulled back to deliver a fraction of its true power, connected with his stomach. The air exploded from his lungs in a single, desperate gasp. The simulated pain jolt was a supernova compared to the earlier ones. It was overwhelming, absolute. His vision turned white, and he was on the ground before he even understood he'd been hit. He curled into a ball, his entire body convulsing from the shock. The simulation ended. The official time, 1.7 seconds, laughter echoed in the arena. It was Connell. It wasn't malicious, just dismissive. The kind of laugh one gives at an absurdity. See? Khan said, turning to Black Canary. Pointless. Can we get a real opponent now? Deku lay on the ground, the pain slowly subsiding, replaced by a cold, numbing humiliation that was infinitely worse. He could feel every eye in the room on him. Cassie's pity. Jamie's awkward sympathy. Canary's professional indifference. Batman's silent, damning judgment. He had never felt so weak, so utterly useless. The rest of the day was a blur of misery. In every class, Deku was the odd one out. In power control and application taught by Red Tornado, he sat on the sidelines, taking notes, while his classmates practiced manipulating energy fields and lifting 100-ton weights. In exo-atmospheric traversal, he watched the others learn to fly or use their powers to navigate in zero gravity. He was the ghost in the machine, a spectator in a world of demigods. Connell's taunt from the day before echoed in his head with sickening clarity. What's he going to do? Take notes? By the time the afternoon arrived, Deku felt like a raw nerve. His body ached from the morning's brutal primer, but his spirit was what truly hurt. He trudged down the corridor to his final class of the day, his head down, trying to become invisible. The schedule on his datapad read, Strategic Tactical Analysis. Instructor, Batman. He entered the classroom and his stomach tightened into a knot. It was the same training arena. Arena Gamma. And waiting on the observation deck, as motionless and imposing as ever, was Batman. The other students were already there, gathered around the central console. Today's lesson will be a practical exercise in threat assessment and strategy. Batman's voice boomed, amplified by the room's acoustics. On the main screen, you will see a simulation, a hostage crisis in downtown Metropolis. A new villain calling himself Deadlock has seized control of the top 3 floors of LexCorp Tower. He has 53 civilian hostages. The holographic screen flared to life, showing a 3D tactical map of the tower. Red dots indicated hostages, blue dots for Deadlock's heavily armed mercenaries, and a single, flashing skull icon for the villain himself. Deadlock's ability is localized temporal stasis, Batman explained. He can create fields where time is frozen. Any object or person entering these fields is instantly locked in place. The fields are visible as a faint, shimmering distortion. He also claims to have a dirty bomb wired to a dead man's switch. If he is killed or incapacitated, the bomb detonates. You have 20 minutes to formulate a plan of entry and neutralize Deadlock without a single hostage casualty. The students stared at the screen, the complexity of the problem sinking in. Connell spoke first, his voice filled with impatient confidence. It's simple. I fly up to the top floor super speed. I'll be on him before he can even blink. Rip the switch out of his hand, knock him out. Done. The mercenaries on the floors below will see you coming. Batman countered instantly. They will alert Deadlock. He will activate his switch. Result, 53 casualties and a radioactive downtown. Your plan fails, Cassie spoke next. Okay, so we need a coordinated assault. Khan, you create a diversion on the east side. While they're distracted, Blue Beetle and I go in through the west windows, take out the guards floor by floor. The time required for a floor-by-floor sweep is 17 minutes, assuming no complications, Batman stated. Deadlock's stated deadline for his demands is 20 minutes. Your timetable is too narrow. A single unforeseen variable results in failure. Jamie Reyes chimed in, the scarab on his back whirring. The scarab suggests we can scan for the bomb's frequency and execute a remote deactivation via a high-frequency pulse. It would require me to get within 50 meters of the device. Deadlock is shielded against all forms of EM and energy pulses, Batman said, shutting him down. A fact your scarab would have discovered if it had cross-referenced Deadlock's technology with known cord industry schematics. It has not. Your plan fails. A frustrated silence fell over the group. Their powers, their greatest assets, were all being systematically neutralized by the parameters of the problem. They were thinking like powerhouses, not strategists. Deku watched, his mind racing. He wasn't looking at the problem in terms of powers. He was looking at it in terms of information. He saw the schematic of the building, the placement of the guards, the shimmering temporal fields. His brain, honed by years of analyzing heroes and villains, began to connect dots the others couldn't see. He saw a path. A dangerous, complicated, but viable path. His hand rose, hesitantly at first, then with more confidence. All eyes turned to him. Kano rolled his eyes. Oh, here we go. Got some notes for us, Midoriya? Deku ignored him, his focus entirely on Batman and the problem. I think I have an idea. Proceed, Batman commanded. Deku took a deep breath. Okay. So, a frontal assault is out. And a stealth assault is too slow. The key isn't Deadlock himself, it's his control over the situation. We have to take that away from him before he even knows the fight has started. He pointed to the schematic. Khan's idea of a diversion is good, but it needs to be bigger. More distracting. Khan, you won't approach the tower. You'll go 2 blocks south, to the geothermal power plant. According to Metropolis city plans, it provides all the power for that 5-block radius. You'll simulate an attack on the plant. Cause a city-wide blackout in that sector. Khan looked confused. A blackout? How does that help? Because it's not just a blackout. Deku continued, his voice gaining speed and confidence as the plan poured out of him. The mercenaries are using standard radio comms. A massive power surge and subsequent blackout from a geothermal plant would flood the airwaves with EM interference. It'll knock out their communications. They won't be able to warn deadlock. It also knocks out the lights in the tower, giving us the element of surprise. He turned to the tactical map. The temporal fields are the main problem. But the schematic shows the tower has a carbon fiber structural frame. Cassie, you won't enter through the windows. While the blackout is happening, you'll fly to the roof and use your strength to tear open the emergency maintenance hatch for the elevator shaft. It's a direct, unmonitored route to the sub-basement. The sub-basement? Cassie asked. But the hostages are on the top floor. Exactly, Deku said, a spark of intensity in his eyes. That's where they expect us. Deadlock's fields are all on the upper floors. But the building's main climate control system is in the sub-basement. Jamie, your scarab can interface with it. You'll override the system and pump halon gas, or any inert, fire-suppressant gas, through the ventilation ducts to the top 3 floors. It's silent. It's invisible. It will knock out every mercenary and deadlock simultaneously without harming the hostages. He paused, taking a breath. The other students were staring at him, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. The whole operation happens in the dark and in silence. Khan provides the diversion and communications blackout. Cassie provides the point of entry. Jamie is the knockout blow. All 3 prongs happen at the same time. Deadlock will be unconscious before he even knows the lights went out. The dead man's switch is never triggered. Total time to neutralize all threats, under 5 minutes. He finished, his chest heaving slightly, the adrenaline of the intellectual exercise leaving him breathless. He had done what he always did. He had analyzed, strategized, and found a path to victory where others saw a brick wall. The observation deck was silent for a full 10 seconds. Kana was speechless, his jaw slightly agape. Cassie was looking at Deku with wide, amazed eyes. Jamie just nodded slowly, a look of profound respect on his face. Then, Batman's voice echoed through the arena. Run the simulation. Midoriya's strategy. The holographic display changed. A blue icon labeled Superba moved towards the power plant. A red icon labeled Wonder Girl moved to the roof. A green icon labeled Blue Beetle descended the elevator shaft. The mercenaries' blue dots flickered and then went out as the simulated gas filled the rooms. The flashing skull icon for Deadlock turned a solid gray. The hostage icons remained a steady, safe red. At the top of the screen, the results flashed in stark, white letters. Scenario complete. Hostage casualties 0. Villain apprehended. Success rating 98%. The remaining 2% was the margin of error for a potential secondary trigger on the bomb, a variable Deku's plan couldn't have accounted for without more data. It was, for all intents and purposes, a perfect solution. No one spoke. The glowing numbers on the screen were a testament to a victory won not with fists or heat vision, but with a mind. Deku looked up at the observation deck, at the dark, silent figure standing there. For a terrifying moment, he thought he would be reprimanded for overstepping. Batman's gaze was fixed on him. The white lenses seemed to pierce right through him, seeing every doubt, every insecurity, every spark of potential. Then, slowly, deliberately, Batman gave him a single, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't praise. It wasn't a compliment. It was an acknowledgement. A sign of respect from the most intimidating man he had ever met. A quiet, authoritative voice cut through the stunned silence. Good analysis, Midoriya. Deku felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with One for All. It was the warmth of validation. Of being seen for who he was, not what he lacked. Batman's voice took on a harder edge as he addressed the entire class. Power without intellect is a blunt instrument. It is brute force, easily outmaneuvered, easily defeated. Midoriya is powerless, yet his plan succeeded where all of yours failed. Why? He didn't wait for an answer. Because you saw the obstacle. He saw the system around the obstacle. You saw a wall. He saw the blueprints for the building the wall was in. That is the lesson. That is the doctrine. Your power is a tool. Your mind must be the weapon. Class dismissed. The lights came up. The simulation faded. As the other students began to file out, still processing what had just happened, Deku remained, his gaze fixed on the spot where the simulation had been. Kano paused as he passed him. He didn't say anything. He just gave Deku a long, complicated look, a look that was no longer just disdain, but was now tinged with a grudging, confused respect. He then walked away without a word. Deku finally let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He felt a surge of exhaustion, both physical and mental, but beneath it all, a tiny seed of hope was beginning to sprout in the barren ground of his self-doubt. That night, for the first time since his arrival, Deku slept. And as he slept, he dreamed. He wasn't in the academy. He was in a vast, dark space, a familiar void he recognized as the subconscious realm of One for All. But it was different now. Faint, ghostly figures flickered at the edge of his vision, the vestiges. They were distant, their forms indistinct, like stars seen through a thick fog. A voice, faint and ethereal, whispered in his mind. It was a woman's voice, kind and strong. The fire is not extinguished, only banked. The vessel is empty, but the embers remain. Another voice, gruff and deep, joined the first. The symbol here, it is strong. A new sun to draw from. Connect to the new source. And a third, a voice he knew so well, a voice that was like a second father to him. All Might's voice, an echo from a distant shore. You never needed the power to be a hero, my boy. The power needed you. Deku reached out in his dream, his hand passing through the ghostly figures. He felt a faint, infinitesimal spark, a single, tiny crackle of green energy, no bigger than a firefly, flickered around his fingertips for a bare second before vanishing. It was almost nothing. But it was not nothing. It was a start. He woke with a gasp, his heart pounding, the phantom sensation of that tiny spark still tingling in his hand. He looked out his window at the silent, spinning earth. He had survived his first day. He had earned a nod from Batman. And somewhere, deep inside him, a forgotten power was beginning to stir. The next morning, the atmosphere in the Academy's common area was noticeably different. The usual boisterous energy was tempered with a quiet, contemplative air. When Izuku Midoriya walked in, balancing a tray with a bowl of cereal and a glass of orange juice, the conversation didn't stop, but it did shift. Kano, who was usually loudly proclaiming his latest training record, was silently observing him over the rim of a mug. Cassie gave him a bright, genuine smile that was less pitying and more admiring. Jamie nodded at him, the blue scarab on his back clicking in a way that Deku was beginning to interpret as inquisitive. He was no longer the invisible charity case. He was the powerless boy who had outthought a god. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. It set a new, impossibly high bar for him. He couldn't punch his way through problems, so he had to think his way through them, every single time, without fail. It was a pressure of a different kind, just as crushing as the weight of One for All had been. He sat down at an empty table, pulling out his notebook. He had already filled 3 pages that morning with a detailed breakdown of Batman's doctrine, analyzing the man's teaching style, his emphasis on systemic thinking, and the psychological impact of his methods. It was a coping mechanism, a way to process the whirlwind of the last 48 hours. Mind if I join you? Deku looked up. Cassie Sandmark stood there, her tray in her hands. Oh. Sure, of course. He stammered, quickly moving his notebook aside. That was seriously incredible yesterday, she said, sliding into the seat opposite him. The way you just saw everything? The power plant, the vents. I would never have thought of that. None of us would have. It wasn't that big a deal, Deku mumbled, a flush creeping up his neck. I'm just used to looking for other options. When you can't break down a wall, you have to find the key. Well, you found it, she said, her smile unwavering. Khan's just mad because you made him look like a Neanderthal. Don't worry, he'll get over it. Probably. Eventually. She leaned forward, her expression turning more serious. It must be hard, though. Being here. Without, She didn't say the word powers, but it hung in the air between them. Deku's gaze fell to his hands. They were just hands now. No latent energy, no promise of world-shaking power. Just bone and sinew and skin. It is, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. It feels like a part of me is missing. Like I lost a limb I didn't even know I had until it was gone. He looked up, meeting her sympathetic gaze. But being a hero was never just about the power. It was about saving people. If I can still do that, even just by thinking of a plan that helps someone else save them, then that has to be enough. The conviction in his own voice surprised him. He hadn't realized he'd felt that way until he'd said it aloud. Cassie's smile returned, softer this time. That's the most heroic thing I've heard all week. Their conversation was interrupted by a new presence. The light in the room seemed to brighten, to grow warmer. Deku turned and saw Superman standing in the doorway, a simple, disarming smile on his face. He wasn't in his costume, but a set of simple civilian clothes, plaid shirt, khaki pants, and a pair of glasses that somehow made the most powerful man on the planet look like a mild-mannered farm boy. It was an absurdly effective disguise. Good morning, everyone, he said, his voice the calm, resonant baritone that could soothe the city. I hope I'm not interrupting. I'm scheduled to teach your first class this morning, Ethics and Philosophy of Heroism. If you'll follow me. A quiet buzz of excitement went through the room. A class taught by Superman himself was a rare occurrence, a significant event. The students quickly finished their breakfasts and followed him out. Deku, walking alongside Cassie, felt a nervous flutter in his chest. This was the man who had found him, who had vouched for him. The man who reminded him so much of All Might. The classroom was not another stark training arena. It was a seminar room, with comfortable chairs arranged in a semicircle around a large hollow projector. The wall behind the projector was another vast window, the earth hanging in the silent void, a constant, humbling backdrop. Superman stood before them, his posture relaxed, his hands in his pockets. He didn't look like a god, but a teacher. Good morning, he began. We spend a lot of time in this academy training your bodies, honing your powers, sharpening your minds. But none of that matters if we don't train your heart. The most important muscle for any hero isn't a bicep or a tricep. It's your conscience. He activated the hollow projector. Images began to flash in the air. A firefighter rushing into a burning building. A doctor working tirelessly in a plague-stricken village. A teacher patiently helping a struggling student. None of them were wearing capes. None of them could fly. What is a hero? Superman asked, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. It's not about the ability to lift a mountain or fly faster than a speeding bullet. It's about a choice. The choice to put someone else's well-being before your own. The choice to stand up for those who can't, to be a voice for the voiceless. Deku was completely captivated. He leaned forward in his seat, his notebook open on his lap, but his pen was still. He didn't want to dissect this. He wanted to absorb it. Every word resonated with the core principles All Might had instilled in him, the very foundation of his dream. Power, Superman continued, his gaze sweeping over the young, powerful faces before him, is a responsibility. It is a burden. When you can do the things we can do, it becomes tempting to see yourself as separate from the people you protect. To see them as fragile, as lesser. That is a dangerous path. It is the path that leads to tyranny. Connell shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Our duty is not to rule. It is to serve. Our greatest strength is not our power, but our humanity. Our compassion. Our ability to connect with the people we save, to understand their fears, their hopes. He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. You will make mistakes. You will fail. You will not be able to save everyone. And that will be the heaviest burden of all. But you must never let that weight crush your spirit, because a hero is more than just a rescuer. The image on the hollow projector changed. It was a picture of Superman, floating above a flooded city, holding a terrified family in his arms. But the focus wasn't on his strength. It was on the look in the family's eyes. A look of pure, unadulterated hope. "You have to be a symbol," Superman said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with the gravity of his own experience. "When people look up in the sky and see you, they shouldn't just see someone who can save their bodies. They have to see someone who can save their spirit. They have to see a promise. The promise that no matter how dark the night gets, the dawn will come. That as long as one of us is standing, they are not alone. That is the true weight of hope. And it is heavier than any mountain." The class ended in a profound silence. The students filed out, not with their usual post-class chatter, but with a quiet, introspective air. They had been given a lesson not in heroics, but in what it meant to be a hero. As Deku packed his notebook, he heard a voice call his name, "Izuku. Do you have a moment?" It was Superman. He was standing by the window, looking out at the earth. Deku's heart leaped into his throat. He nodded, quickly walking over. "Yes, sir." "Superman, sir." Superman chuckled, a warm, easy sound. "Please. In here, I'm Clark." He turned from the window, his blue eyes kind and perceptive. "I saw your work in Batman's simulation yesterday. It was impressive." He was impressed. And Bruce is not an easy man to impress. "Thank you, sir." "Clark," Deku stammered, feeling like a first-year meeting All Might all over again. "I also wanted to talk to you about what you've lost," Clark said, his tone shifting, becoming more personal, more gentle. "When you told us your story, you spoke of your mentor All Might. You described him as a symbol of peace. I think I understand what that means." He paused, his gaze becoming distant, as if looking at a memory only he could see. "There's a pressure that comes with being that symbol, a feeling that you have to be perfect, that you have to carry the weight of the entire world on your shoulders. That you can't show weakness. That you can't fail." Deku felt a lump form in his throat. It was as if Superman was reading the pages of his own secret diary. "You were chosen to carry that legacy, Izuku," Clark continued, his eyes meeting Deku's. "That's an incredible honor, but it's also a terrible burden for someone so young. And then, to have the tool for that job, the power, just taken away from you. I can't imagine how that must feel." Tears pricked at the corners of Deku's eyes. He had been trying so hard to be strong, to be the analytical strategist Batman wanted, to not be the powerless charity case Kal-El saw. But here, in front of this man who was the closest thing to All Might this world had, the dam of his composure finally broke. "It feels like I failed him," Deku whispered, the words choked with a grief he hadn't allowed himself to feel. "All Might gave me everything. He gave me his power, his dream, and I lost it. I let him down. I let everyone down." A single tear traced a path down his cheek. Clark didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, his presence a comforting, solid anchor in Deku's storm of self-doubt. Then, he placed a large, warm hand on Deku's shoulder. The contact was gentle, but it felt as solid as a mountain. "He didn't give you his power because he thought you were strong, Izuku," Clark said softly. "He gave it to you because he knew you were good. The power was just a megaphone for the hero who was already inside you. That hero didn't vanish when the power did. I saw him in that alley in Metropolis. Batman sees him in the strategy room. The power isn't what makes you a hero, Izuku. It's your choices. It's your heart." He squeezed Deku's shoulder gently. "Don't try to be All Might. Don't try to be me. Just be Izuku Midoriya. That's more than enough." The words were a balm on his wounded soul. It was permission to grieve, permission to be himself, permission to start over. Deku scrubbed at his eyes, a watery, grateful smile on his face. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." The afternoon's training session was a rescue simulation, overseen by the android hero Red Tornado. The scenario was a collapsing building, a multi-story office complex that was coming down in stages after a simulated earthquake. The students' objective was to locate and evacuate 6 civilian dummies before the structure completely pancaked. "Efficiency and situational awareness are paramount," Red Tornado's synthesized voice announced from the control booth. "Structural integrity is failing. Your powers may cause further collapse. Proceed with caution. The team, Deku, Cassie, Khan, and Jamie, entered the simulated disaster zone. It was chaos. Concrete dust filled the air, emergency lights flickered erratically, and the sound of groaning metal and cracking cement was a constant, unnerving symphony. Okay, spread out, Khan ordered, taking charge. Jamie, scan for life signs. Cassie, you take the upper floors. I'll start clearing the heavy debris on the ground floor. Midoriya, you stay here at the entrance and coordinate. Try not to get in the way. The casual dismissal stung, but Deku bit back a retort. Khan was right in a way. This was a physical challenge. What could he do? He set up a makeshift command post near the entrance, using his datapad to monitor the building's schematics as Jamie relayed sensor readings. Got one! Jamie's voice crackled over the comms. 3rd floor, west wing. Pinned under a fallen support beam. I'm on it, Cassie responded. Deku watched her icon on his screen move swiftly. He cross-referenced it with the structural integrity map. Cassie, wait! He shouted into his comm. The floor beneath that beam is compromised. If you just lift it, you could trigger a secondary collapse on the whole wing. What do you suggest I do then? Cassie's voice was strained. This person doesn't have much time. Deku's mind raced, processing the data. There's a reinforced load-bearing wall 10 feet to your left. You need to brace, not lift. Use your strength to shift the beam horizontally, slide it onto that wall. It'll hold, and it will relieve the pressure on the floor. There was a moment of silence, then a grunt of extreme effort from Cassie. Okay, it's moving. I got it. The dummy is free. Thanks, Deku. That was close. Relief washed over Deku. This was his role. The team's brain. He could do this. He guided Jamie around a dangerously unstable electrical conduit and helped Khan find a structurally sound way to clear a path, preventing him from just smashing through a wall and bringing the ceiling down. He was in his element. Then, everything went wrong. A sudden, violent tremor, part of the simulation, shook the entire structure. A massive section of the 4th floor ceiling gave way. Cassie, look out! Jamie yelled. Deku's head snapped up from his datapad just in time to see Cassie's blue icon disappear under a massive red warning symbol that screamed structural failure. His blood ran cold. He knew it was a simulation. He knew she wasn't in real danger. But in that split second, his mind didn't care. The image that flashed in his brain was her bright, encouraging smile from that morning. His first real friend in this strange, lonely world. He didn't think. He ran. He sprinted into the collapsing building, dodging falling chunks of concrete and twisted rebar. His lungs burned with dust. Cassie! Where are you? Here! Her voice was strained, weak. My leg, it's pinned. I can't get enough leverage. He found her on the 2nd floor. A monstrous slab of pre-stressed concrete, the size of a small car, had pinned her leg. Her face was pale, her hands scrabbling uselessly at the rough surface of the slab. Even with her demigod strength, the angle was wrong. She couldn't move it. Another tremor shook the building. The ceiling above them groaned, threatening to give way completely. There was no time to call for Khan. No time for a clever plan. The ceiling was coming down now. In that moment, something ignited inside Izuku Midoriya. It wasn't a thought. It was an instinct, a primal, desperate command that screamed from the very core of his being. I have to save her. He remembered Superman's words, the promise that as long as one of us is standing, they are not alone. He remembered All Might's voice, you too can become a hero. He remembered that first, insane, quirkless dash towards the sludge villain to save Bakugo. The feeling was the same. A torrential, overwhelming flood of pure, unadulterated heroic will. The will to save. He grabbed the edge of the concrete slab. His muscles screamed in protest. It was impossible. It was tons of dead weight. But he pulled anyway, his teeth gritted, a raw, desperate roar tearing from his throat. And then he felt it. It started as a faint warmth in his chest, a single, lonely ember. The raging inferno of his will to save acted like a bellows, fanning it, feeding it. The warmth became a fire, spreading through his veins, along his nerves. It felt familiar yet different. It wasn't the borrowed power of One for All as he knew it. This felt newer, more raw. It was the echo of that power, reawakening, drawing not on the legacy of the past users, but on the new symbol of hope he had just connected with, Superman. A faint, viridian bioelectric energy, barely visible in the dim, dusty light, crackled around his arms. It wasn't the furious green lightning of full cowling. It was a softer, more organic light, like bioluminescence. With a final, guttural shout he heaved. The concrete slab moved. It scraped against the floor, lifting a few precious inches, just enough for Cassie to pull her leg free. He held it there for a single, agonizing second, his entire body trembling with an effort that should have torn him apart. Then, as Cassie scrambled clear, the power vanished as quickly as it had come. The slab crashed back to the ground with a deafening boom. The strength fled from his limbs, and he collapsed beside it, his chest heaving, his vision swimming with black spots. His body felt like it had been struck by lightning. Cassie rushed to his side. Deku! Are you okay? How did you do that? Khan and Jamie arrived a moment later, their eyes wide. Khan stared from Deku, to the massive slab of concrete, and back again. His jaw was hanging open. No way. I saw that. You lifted that. Deku couldn't answer. He was too busy trying to breathe. He had no idea what had just happened. He had felt something. A spark. A ghost of the power he had lost. No one else had seen the faint green light. It had been too quick, too subtle, obscured by the dust and chaos. All they saw was the impossible result. The powerless boy from another world had, for one brief, heroic moment, displayed a flicker of superhuman strength. The simulation ended, the collapsing walls freezing in place before dematerializing into the black grid of the arena. Deku was left kneeling on the floor, shaking and confused, the center of 3 pairs of stunned, uncomprehending eyes. And from the observation deck, Batman watched, his expression hidden behind the cowl. But the slight, almost imperceptible narrowing of his lenses indicated that he, too, had seen. And unlike the others, he knew that what he had just witnessed was not a fluke. It was a beginning. The ghost of power was a tantalizing torment. In the days following the rescue simulation, Izuku Midoriya found himself chasing a phantom. He would go to the training rooms during off hours, the vast, empty spaces a silent testament to his own inadequacy. He'd stand before 100-kilogram weight, a triviality for him just weeks ago, and close his eyes. He'd try to replicate the feeling, the desperate, world-burning need to save Cassie. He would channel the memory of Superman's words, the very concept of hope, trying to use it as a key to unlock the door in his soul. He'd pull. He'd strain. He'd grunt with effort, his face turning red, the muscles in his back and arms screaming. But the weight remained stubbornly, mockingly inert. The spark would not come. The faint, bioluminescent crackle of energy he'd felt remained a one-time miracle, a fluke he was beginning to believe he had imagined. It was during one such moment of futile effort, his hands trembling as he failed to budge the weight, that a shadow fell over him. Still trying to prove you're not a baseline? Deku let go of the weight with a sigh, not needing to turn around. He knew that voice. The tone of bored condescension was unmistakable. He turned to see Connell leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed over the red S on his black t-shirt. He wasn't smirking, but his eyes held a look of intense, analytical suspicion. I don't have to prove anything to you, Khan, Deku said, his voice tired. Yeah, you do, Khan shot back, pushing off the wall and walking closer. I saw what you did in the sim. 1 minute you're the team mascot. The next you're lifting a solid ton of reinforced concrete. That's not a baseline move. So what is it? Some kind of adrenaline-based strength you can't control? A latent metagene activation? What's your secret? There's no secret, Deku said, turning away and grabbing a towel to wipe the sweat from his brow. The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. Don't lie to me. Khan's voice was low, almost a growl. He was suddenly right behind Deku, his presence a palpable wave of heat and power. I know what it's like to be a lab experiment. I know what it's like to have secrets. If Cadmus gets a whiff of some new, unstable power popping up in the League's own backyard, They'll be on you so fast your head will spin. So you better figure out what you are, and you better learn to control it. With that, he turned and stalked out of the room, leaving Deku alone with his frustration and a new, chilling seed of fear. Cadmus. He remembered Batman's files. The secretive, amoral project that had created Khan. The last thing he needed was to end up on their radar. His troubled thoughts were interrupted by the station's intercom. The calm, telepathic voice of John Johns echoed in the minds of all the students. All Academy members, please report to Briefing Room Delta. A new training assignment will be issued in 5 minutes, Deku sighed, tossing the towel aside. There was no time to dwell on his phantom power. Class was in session. Briefing Room Delta was a tiered amphitheater focused on a central holographic display. When Deku arrived, Cassie and Jamie were already there, saving him a seat. Khan sat a row above them, pointedly looking away. A moment later, a new student Deku had only seen in passing slipped into the room and sat by herself at the far end of the row. She was a pale girl with long, dark hair that fell over her face, and she moved with a quiet, almost timid grace, clutching a datapad to her chest as if it were a shield. John Johns materialized in the center of the room, his form shifting from transparent to solid in a disconcerting, fluid motion. Good morning. His mental voice washed over them. Your training thus far has focused on power control and direct confrontation. However, a hero's most valuable asset is often not their strength, but their subtlety. Today's exercise will focus on infiltration, data retrieval, and absolute stealth. The hollow projector flickered to life, showing the schematic of a fortified, multi-level structure. This is a simulation of a HIV data fortress. Your objective is to infiltrate the facility, bypass multiple layers of security, retrieve a data core from the central server, and exfiltrate without triggering a single alarm. This is not a combat exercise. If you are detected, the mission is an immediate failure. A murmur went through the students. This was a different kind of challenge. You will be working in teams of 3. John continued. The room went quiet with anticipation. Your team assignments have been chosen to create a balance of skill sets and to test your ability to adapt to different personalities. Team Alpha will be Wonder Girl, Blue Beetle. John paused, his red eyes sweeping over the room. And Superbo, Khan grunted, but Cassie and Jamie exchanged a determined look. They were a solid team. Team Beta, John announced, will be Izuku Midoriya. Deku's stomach tightened. Lyra Kane. The quiet girl with the dark hair looked up, her eyes wide with a sort of panicked surprise. And a third member currently on an off-station assignment who will join you via remote comms. For the physical infiltration, it will be the 2 of you. He was paired with the girl who looked like she was afraid of her own shadow. He glanced at her. She quickly looked away, pulling her hair further over her face. Lyra possesses formidable telekinetic abilities, John explained, as if sensing Deku's apprehension. She is capable of manipulating objects at a molecular level, a vital skill for bypassing delicate security systems. After the briefing, Deku approached his new teammate. Hi, he said, offering a small, encouraging smile. I'm Izuku. But you can call me Deku. Lyra, she whispered, not meeting his eyes. She was fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. I'm not very good at these team things. It's okay, neither am I, really, Deku said reassuringly. What John said about your powers, manipulating things on a molecular level? That's amazing. It's like a super precise version of a levitation quirk. You could probably bypass a pressure plate without triggering it, or even unlock a door from the inside by moving the tumblers one by one, right? Lyra looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. It was the first time someone had looked at her power with academic fascination instead of awe or fear. Yes. I can. If I can concentrate, that's our key then, Deku said, his own confidence growing. He was already formulating a plan. Their third teammate was a no-show, so it was just the 2 of them in a smaller briefing room, staring at the schematic of the HIV base. They were scheduled to run the simulation after Team Alpha. Okay, Deku said, pulling out his notebook. So, the main entrance is a death trap. Motion sensors, thermal imaging, automated turrets. We can't go that way. There's a ventilation shaft on the roof. Lyra pointed out softly, tracing a line on the holographic map with a slender finger. It leads directly to the third-floor maintenance corridors, bypassing the first 2 security checkpoints. Perfect. Deku's eyes lit up. That's our entry. Once we're inside, we have to deal with laser grids and sound sensors. That's where you come in. Can you create a telekinetic shield to part the lasers around us? Or muffle the sound of our footsteps? I can, she said, her voice a little stronger. The sound muffling is easier. It's like creating a small vacuum around our feet. The laser grid, that requires more focus. The beams are hot. I'd have to bend the light itself, not just block it. It's delicate, but you can do it, Deku affirmed, not as a question, but a statement of fact. She nodded slowly. As long as it's quiet. I need it to be quiet, so I can concentrate. Suddenly, the door to their briefing rooms slid open and Connell stormed in, his face a mask of thunder. This is ridiculous. He snarled, not at them, but at the universe in general. He began pacing the small room like a caged tiger. A stealth mission? They'd got me, the most powerful weapon in the academy, playing peekaboo with a bunch of stupid holograms. Cassie wants to spend an hour disabling cameras, and Beetle keeps saying the scarab advises caution. Caution! I could level that entire building in 10 seconds. The aggressive energy pouring off him was a physical force. The air in the room grew thick and tense. Lyra flinched, instinctively drawing her arms around herself, her brief moment of confidence evaporating like mist. Deku frowned. Khan, we're trying to plan. Oh, right, the B-team is planning. Khan scoffed, stopping his pacing to glower at them. He pointed a thumb at Deku. Let me guess, your grand plan is to spend 3 hours crawling through a vent, and then you'll have her. He gestured dismissively at Lyra. Try to pick a lock with her brain for another hour. It's slow. It's weak. Why tiptoe around when you can just kick down the door? Because kicking down the door gets you killed, Khan! Deku shot back, his frustration boiling over. This is a stealth mission. The objective is to not be seen. It's the entire point of the exercise. The point of being a hero is to win. Khan roared, taking a step forward. Not to play hide and seek. Winning and saving people aren't always the same thing. Deku retorted, standing his ground. Sometimes winning means being smart enough not to fight at all. Their argument was a sudden, violent storm in the small room. Lyra, caught in the crossfire, looked pale and distressed. She squeezed her eyes shut, her hands pressed against her temples as if trying to block out the noise. A stack of datapads on the nearby table rattled, vibrating in time with the escalating shouting match. Neither Deku nor Khan noticed. Guys, please, Lyra whispered, but her voice was lost in the verbal onslaught. Finally, Khan threw his hands up in disgust. Forget it. I'm going to go punch something. Good luck with your plan, Midoriya. Try not to fail too hard. He stormed out, the door hissing shut behind him, leaving a vibrating, toxic silence in his wake. Deku let out a long, frustrated breath, running a hand through his already messy hair. I'm sorry about that, Lyra. He's difficult. He turned to her. She was trembling slightly, her face ashen. The datapads on the table were still. Lyra? Are you okay? I'm fine, she whispered, though she clearly wasn't. Let's just finish the plan. They did, but the easy collaborative energy from before was gone, replaced by a tense, fragile focus. Deku couldn't shake the feeling that their mission was already compromised before it had even begun. The simulation began. The dark, grid walls of the training arena transformed into the rain-slicked exterior of a concrete fortress under a perpetually stormy night sky. A cold, simulated wind whipped around them. Okay, Deku said into his comm, his voice a low whisper. Our remote support is online. Go ahead, Oracle, acknowledged. A crisp, female voice replied in his ear. It was their mysterious third member. I have access to the facility's external cameras. You have a 30-second window between guard patrols on the roof. Move now. Deku looked at Lyra, who gave a shaky nod. Using a maintenance ladder, they scrambled up the side of the building, the simulated rain making the rungs slippery. They made it to the roof and located the ventilation shaft just as Oracle had described. Lyra took a deep breath, her eyes closing in concentration. The heavy steel grill over the vent lifted silently from its moorings and floated to the side, settling on the rooftop without a sound. "We're in," Deku whispered, dropping down into the darkness of the shaft. So far, so good. They crawled through the cramped, metallic maze, guided by Oracle's voice and the schematics on Deku's wrist-mounted display. They emerged into a maintenance corridor on the 3rd floor. The air was still and quiet, the only sound the low hum of the building's power. "Sound sensors are active in this hallway," Oracle warned. "They'll pick up a pin drop." Deku looked at Lyra. She nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. She held her hands out, palms down, and as they began to walk, Deku felt a strange, pressureless bubble form around their feet. Their footsteps were completely, unnervingly silent. They moved down the hall like ghosts, a perfect team. Deku felt a surge of pride. This was working. They reached the first major obstacle, the laser grid. A crisscrossing web of brilliant red light blocked the corridor, pulsing with deadly energy. "This is the delicate part," Deku whispered. "Take your time." Lyra stood before the grid, her entire body rigid with focus. She raised a trembling hand. The air around the laser beams began to shimmer, to warp like a heat haze. One by one, the crimson lines of light began to bend, to curve away from a path in the center, creating a narrow, winding tunnel of safe passage. It was an incredible display of fine control. I can't hold it for long," she grunted, sweat beading on her forehead. "You don't have to," Deku said. "Just get me through. I'll disable the power source from the other side." He started to move into the tunnel of bent light she had created for him. He was halfway through when a voice boomed from the arena's speakers, startling them both. "Simulation for Team Alpha is now complete. Result failure." The sudden, loud announcement shattered the fragile silence. Lyra cried out, her concentration breaking like glass. The laser grid snapped back into place with a vicious hiss. A beam sliced across Deku's path, inches from his face. He scrambled back just in time. "What was that?" Lyra gasped, clutching her head. "It's Khan's team," Deku realized with a sinking feeling. "They must have been detected." A moment later, his calm crackled to life, but it wasn't Oracle's voice. It was Khan's, full of static and fury, apparently on a team-wide channel. "Stupid plan. If you'd just let me go through the wall, we'd have been done in a minute." Cassie's voice cut in, equally strained. "You tripped the silent alarm, Khan. You were moving too fast. We told you to wait for Jamie to disable it. Waiting is for losers. This whole stealth thing is a joke." The argument raged over their comms, an invasive, chaotic noise filling their minds. Deku frantically tried to switch to a private channel, but he couldn't shut them out. "Lyra, we have to try again," he urged, his voice tight with stress. "Block them out? Just focus." "I can't," she cried, her voice cracking. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. "It's too loud. They're too angry." The air around them began to feel heavy. A loose ceiling panel above them started to vibrate. The lights flickered. Her distress was causing her powers to leak, to lash out randomly. "Lyra, breathe," Deku said, trying to keep his own voice calm, a rock in the storm. "Just listen to me. We can still do this." But it was too late. Over the calm, Khan let out a roar of pure, unadulterated frustration. In the real world, in the adjacent training arena, he had just punched a wall. The sound didn't carry, but the raw, violent emotion behind it flooded the calm channel. That was the final straw. Lyra screamed, a short, sharp sound of psychic overload. A wave of invisible force erupted from her. The laser grid emitters exploded in a shower of sparks. The ceiling panels buckled. An alarm, shrill and deafening, blared to life. Red light flooded the corridor. On the wall in front of them, 2 stark words appeared in giant, block letters. Mission failed. They stood there in the blaring, crimson failure, the angry voices on the comms finally falling silent. The simulation dissolved, leaving them in the empty, black grid room. They had gotten the worst score in the class. John stood before them in the observation room, his expression unreadable, which was somehow more damning than any look of anger could have been. "Your objective was stealth," he said, his mental voice cold and sharp as ice. You triggered every alarm in the facility, and ended the simulation by destroying the room. You not only failed the mission, you set a new record for the most catastrophic failure in this exercise's history. Deku and Lyra stood with their heads bowed. Khan, Cassie, and Jamie stood a short distance away, having received their own reprimand. Teamwork is not simply about combining abilities, John continued, his gaze seeming to pierce right through them. It is about trust, communication, and empathy. It is about understanding that your emotional state affects not only yourself, but your entire team. You have all failed to grasp this fundamental concept today. You are dismissed. The Martian manhunter faded from view, leaving the 5 students in a heavy, accusatory silence. Khan broke it. He spun around, his face dark with fury, and jabbed a finger directly at Deku. This is your fault, he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Deku looked up, shocked. My fault? Your team was screaming at each other over the comms. You broke Lyra's concentration. My team failed because stealth is a stupid strategy for people with real power. Khan shot back, advancing on him. But your team failed because you're a liability. You bring everyone down to your level. You can't fight, you can't contribute. All you can do is make these slow, convoluted plans that fall apart the second something goes wrong. You're a dead weight, Midoriya. You don't belong here. The words were a physical blow. Dead weight. Liability. Don't belong. It was every insult, every jeer from his childhood, amplified and given voice by the clone of Superman. Deku felt something inside him snap. All the frustration, all the humiliation, all the desperate effort of the past few days boiled over. You're wrong, Deku said, his voice quiet, but shaking with a cold fury that surprised even himself. Oh yeah? How? Khan challenged, getting right in his face. What can you possibly do that I can't? I can think, Deku said, his green eyes, usually so bright and earnest, now hard as chips of emerald ice. He looked Khan up and down, not with fear, but with the cold, cutting precision of his analytical mind, and he finally let the truth, as he saw it, fly. You talk about power, Khan, but you're just a hammer. You see every problem as a nail because it's the only thing you know how to do. You think being a hero is about how hard you can hit. It's not. It's about how many people you can save. He took a step forward, forcing the bigger, stronger boy to take a step back. I may not have any power right now, but I know its value. I know that every action has a consequence, that every bit of rubble you cause could crush a civilian, that every fight you start could endanger the people you're supposed to be protecting. He looked Khan directly in the eye, and delivered the final, devastating critique. You have all the power in the world, Khan, but you don't know how to use it to truly save people. You only know how to use it to fight. The words hung in the air, brutal and true. They struck Khan harder than any physical punch could have. They hit the very core of his deepest insecurity, the fear that he wasn't a hero like Superman, but just a living weapon created in a lab. The anger drained from his face, replaced by a raw, wounded look. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was completely silenced. A quiet sob broke the tension. Lyra, who had been standing silently by, turned and fled the room, tears streaming down her face. Cassie shot Deku a hurt, disappointed look before going after her. Jamie just shook his head and walked away, leaving Deku and Khan alone. Khan stared at Deku for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before he turned and stalked out of the room without another word. Deku was left standing alone, his body trembling with the aftermath of the confrontation. He hadn't meant for it to be so cruel, but he had been pushed, and he had pushed back with the only weapon he had, the truth. And the truth, he now realized, could be just as destructive as any superpower. He stumbled back to his room, the weight of his failure and his harsh words pressing down on him. He fell onto his bed, not even bothering to change out of his training uniform. He felt like a complete and utter failure, not just as a hero in training, but as a person. He had hurt Lyra. He had eviscerated Khan. He was no better than Bakugo had been in middle school. Exhaustion, both emotional and physical, claimed him. He fell into a deep, troubled sleep. He found himself in the void, the familiar dark space of his subconscious. But it was clearer now. Sharper. The ghostly figures of the vestiges were no longer indistinct smudges. He could see their silhouettes now, 7 of them, standing in a silent circle around him. They felt closer, more present. "So, you've finally started to listen?" A kind, female voice echoed in the space. A figure stepped forward from the circle. It was a woman with long, flowing hair and a kind smile, though her eyes held a hint of sorrow. A small mole was visible under her mouth. It was Nana Shimura, the 7th user, All Might's master. Where am I?" Deku asked, his voice sounding strange in the ethereal silence. "You are within yourself," Nana said, her form shimmering slightly. "You are within one for all. Or what's left of it." "What's left?" Deku asked, his heart clenching. "I thought it was gone." "Not gone, child," she explained, her voice like a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Shattered. When you passed through the dimensional barrier, the power was not erased. It was violently dispersed. Imagine a glass of water thrown into the desert. The water is still there, but the individual droplets are too small, too scattered to be of any use. They must be gathered again, drop by drop." It made a strange, impossible kind of sense. "How?" Deku asked. "When I lifted that concrete, what was that?" "That was the first drop," Nana said with a proud smile. "One for all is a peculiar power. It is a stockpile of raw energy, yes, but at its core, it is fueled by something more. It is fueled by the absolute, unwavering will to save others." She gestured to the stardusted void around them. "In our world, the ultimate symbol of that will was your mentor, Tashinori Yagi. All Might. His very presence was a beacon that helped stabilize and channel the power. When you came here, that beacon was gone. The power had no anchor. It scattered. But now," Deku prompted, a fragile hope blooming in his chest. "But now you have found a new anchor." Nana's form flickered, and for a moment, an image superimposed over the void, Superman, his cape billowing, his face a mask of gentle strength. This world's symbol of hope. Your connection to his powerful ideal, his unwavering spirit, created a new focal point, that, combined with your desperate, pure desire to save your friend, it was enough to gather one single, tiny drop of the power back to you. She stepped closer, her ghostly hand reaching out to touch his cheek. He felt a faint warmth. "The power is not the same, Izuku. It is not the legacy we gave you. It is being reborn. Filtered through you and the ideals of this new world. You are at the beginning again. The very beginning. So, I can use it?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You can," she affirmed. "But it is a candle flame where once there was a bonfire. You must be careful. You must nurture it. You must consciously draw upon that will to save, that connection to hope. For now, you can only access a sliver. Perhaps 1%. The vestiges began to fade, their silhouettes receding back into the fog. Nana's voice was the last thing he heard, a fading, encouraging whisper. "You are not a dead weight, Izuku Midoriya. You are the vessel. Now begin again." Deku's eyes snapped open. He was in his room. The first gray light of a new station day was filtering through his window. He felt different. A quiet, steady warmth hummed in the center of his chest. It was infinitesimally small, a single pilot light in a vast, empty furnace. But it was there. It was real. He sat up, his heart pounding with a wild, new hope. He held up his right hand, his fingers trembling. He closed his eyes, shutting out the world. He didn't think about fighting. He didn't think about Khan or Batman or his failure. He thought of Cassie, trapped under the concrete. He thought of the little girl with the All Might keychain. He thought of his mother's worried face. He focused on the raw, burning, all-consuming need to protect, to save, to be the hero he was born to be. He focused, and he pulled. A single, brilliant spark of green energy, no bigger than a firefly, flickered into existence above his palm. It danced there for a moment, a tiny, defiant star in the gloom of his room, crackling with a faint, almost inaudible hum. It was weak. It was pathetic compared to the roaring inferno he once wielded, but it was his. And it was a start.